Welcome to Wine and Real Estate, the podcast where we drink wine, we have fun, and we learn about real estate investing. Real estate investing is so much more than just buying buildings. It's about building relationships, building your dreams, building your dream lifestyle, customizing your life. What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? It's much more than money. It's more than getting rich. It's a different type of wealth. It's the wealth of time, the wealth of freedom. And now let's get to the wine and the real estate. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine and Real Estate. And today I'm really glad I have a special guest, an actual wine expert. So as you know, in my episodes, I always have people that enjoy wine. I'm a wine enthusiast, but I don't really know what I'm doing. It's just like buying properties blindly. That I'm better at, but the wine, I just grab bottles and I read the label and I look very smart. So welcome, Rob. If you could give an intro on who you are and what you do, and that's it, your story.
Well, thank you very much for having me here, Francois. This is awesome. Merci beaucoup. This is great. Hope all the viewers are having a great time. Thank you for tuning in on this. And again, thank you for having me here. What could possibly be wrong with a conversation about wine and real estate? I actually have a liqueur here today, but I will talk a bit about this guy too. You made me think of a pretty iconic wine to bring up and have a chat with. So I own the Drunken Grape. I started that about 6 years ago. I came into the wine field and the world of wine education more like about 10 years ago. I was coming out of an IT business where I would place consultants on projects, and I was at my late father's house having dinner. And I grew up with him making wine and beer. So he's always been more than an aficionado. He actually knew quite a bit about the subject in life, had books on it. And he inspired me to get into this field because I was thinking of getting into project management. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you want to even do that? That's just a saturated field. There's going to be a million PMPs running around." Sure enough, he's right now. There's a bazillion PMPs. I mean, it's a hard designation, but there's probably less wine professionals and even far less beer professionals. So I'll get into my beer story a bit as well.
Yeah, because you're a beer sommelier, I think, as well.
I am through Prud'homme Beer Certification, which is the only multi-tiered true in-class sommelier program in North America. So it and Cicerone are your two main schools that kind of compete with each other. But my thoughts are it's kind of like WSET or the Master Court of Sommeliers or the Wine Scholar Guild or the International Sommeliers Guild, or even just going to Algonquin to go through their program and then doing the level 3 WSET at the end. All education is good. It's all valuable. It's really how you apply it. It's kind of like studying computer math at Brock University as opposed to Queen's or Carleton, or doing a collegiate level in it. At some point, it all just crosses and meshes anyway. So yeah, my father talked me into it. So, of course, we were having a glass of wine. I knew nothing about it. And he said, you have a side job at the Marriott Hotel here in Ottawa, bartending. Why don't you pursue the wine world? That is just a lot more your personality, your character. You have a cruise ship background in entertainment, auctioning artwork and that. You're lively, you're social. Why don't you do this? And it was the first time, actually the second time, he supported me in the cruise line business when I got into it. He was a naval officer. So once he saw the money you could make in it and the fun you had in it, I mean, we worked hard, but he supported that. And he talked me into this. And you know what, Francois, I'm glad I did it because it's been quite an interesting 10-year journey. And so I set up the Drunken Grape back in October of 2015. And I was thinking of naming it Bacchus Beverage Group and all sorts of other nonsense. And we're having Thanksgiving dinner at my older brother's house. And my stepmother looked at me and she said, "Why don't you name it the Drunken Grape?" We just erupted in laughter. Yeah, we said, there is zero freaking chance this name's available. Sure enough, it was. This is the weird part. So the .ca was available, not the .com. Somebody actually had that locked in England, but nobody had at the Drunken Grape on Instagram. Nobody had the whole moniker of at the Drunken Grape on Twitter. Nobody owned it. So I took it. And then I went and trademarked the name. And when it became a registered mark, about a year later and about $4,000 later out of my bank account, because you got to protect your assets.
Totally.
I ended up getting the .com on back order from GoDaddy.com for $9 because the person I'd actually offered up to $2,000 for kept refusing it. And I think what happened was when they saw that registered R around it in a circle, it terrified them and they dumped it right away because in truth, it starts to limit you as to what you can do when somebody owns a trademark anywhere in the world. I pigeonholed them. So that's really the precipice of it. And, started off with live events. Actually, I didn't really know exactly where I wanted to take it, to be honest with you. I knew I wanted to do video. I knew I wanted to do branding and help wineries and breweries grow and expand. Problem is the Canadian market, a lot of them don't want to pay. And I hate to say that, but Canadians sort of have, as you know, being an international investor, and I know we had a bit of a chat before, Canadians pull the gun a lot slower than a lot of other societies, like the United States to the south and other cultures that are, even the Germans and other cultures, they're just more preemptive on business than we are, or Japan or the Australians. They're much more quick to just grab a baton, or New Zealand or wherever they may be. They just grab that football and run it into the end zone much quicker than we do. We get too bureaucratic and heavy about things. So it was a slow and painful process. And it was, a lot of it was just sort of, the live side was just hunkered down by a lot of baby boomers who really manipulated the scene here over 20 years, offering the same nonsensical events. You go in, you get your host bar, your ticket bar, the same banquet waiters and the same Chateau Laurier, the Marriott or the Westin Hotel are passing around food. It's the same people showing up, posing and pretending. And I didn't want to have anything to do with that. And I was boring. I had one plan where, man, can I take this virtual? Can I work off the back of a boat one day? And really take this global and not be hunkered down by a supply line or chain. I mean, some other virtual event companies have come up, like beer companies. I just saw one that looks pretty exciting, and I wanted to congratulate the guy on LinkedIn out of LA. But obviously, by shipping beer to you and putting you in a beer club, they're sort of locked and loaded into having inventory and things like that. I didn't want that. I want to just truly be virtual and be an agnostic. When I host my events, I am not tied to product. And I want people to know that there's a huge difference between being tied to a list you offer as opposed to being free and agnostic. When you're agnostic, you're going to get a real experience. It's unbiased because I'm actually looking at the best of the best to bring in for your event. And the pandemic hit. So I hit the switch to virtual. None of us knew what the was going to go on for 5 months or so. But come the summer of 2020, I was sitting there going, we're not getting out of this anytime soon.
Might be a while.
I started putting the meter on in about August into putting out some video and content. This is before I launched my own podcast, the Virtual Happy Hour Experience, which is quite new, actually. It's in its infancy. It's 6 months old. So
congrats. Anyway, 6 months.
Hey, thanks, man.
Most people get to 5 episodes. That's it. So if you surpass 5, you're already in the top 1%.
Oh yeah, it's hard work. So that's what got me into it. And the pandemic really hit the switch on it. And you know what? With the destruction of corporate travel, the collapse of commercial real estate, which is only being propped up by government central bank spending right now. We know this. Nobody wants to go back to the office. There's remote teams everywhere now. And you no longer need to fly Bob to meet Susan from, Seattle to Toronto, Canada. You don't need to do that anymore. You can just go on Zoom now and do this virtually. And companies aren't going to bring this travel back. There's zero chance of it. Google saved over $1 billion in, I think, the first 5-6 months of the pandemic, wiping out corporate travel. They're not bringing it back, people. So this is where the virtual side lifted up. And that's really presently what I do on this side. Now I want to get into more coaching and on how to host virtual events for people, because I think a lot of people don't know how to do this. So there's going to be a course offering coming up. It is. And you really, it's like yourself, you've got quite a bit of a personality and a character in the real estate world, and you'd have to be able to magnify that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I love that you're not tied, like you said. The analogy I would get is like a financial planner. So some people work for Manulife and some are fee-based financial planners. So if you want an honest opinion on wine or beer, that's it. Go fee-based, even for wine, because then it's objective. It's real. We get to know what you think for real. Like, you're not being paid commissions or anything. It's your opinion. So
yeah, and it's an easy road to fall into the instant commission trap, right? Because
oh
I
yeah,
could easily just contact half a dozen wineries and say half a
and
dozen
they'd say
breweries and say,
yes.
yes, tie in, help us move our product, and you'll get a point or two. You'll get a better deal than the rep, but you'll probably get double the commission points because we're not paying your salary.
That's it.
We're trafficking it through. We used to call this a not a throughput, but it was like a transfer of a contract in my old IT consulting world. So I'm familiar with this process, but it kills your bias. It turns you it creates bias, and it kills your agnostic, holistic approach.
Yeah.
And it's easier to just go run for the money on the low-lying fruit tree, right? But eventually it runs into trouble because you will get somebody that just says, hey, I want a presentation that's open up about the beers of Belgium. I don't care about the offering that you have. And you might be tied in, and you're out because you're probably tied into a contract now to secure and offer those people's products. Why? Because it's in their interest to do that too. No business deal will ever keep you open up on that opposite end where I can just sell your products, but be open to sell everybody else's. Nobody's going to sign up for that.
Nope.
So that's why I kept it open. And I think it's the same with you, right? I mean, you're not part of Royal LePage or,
I'm not a realtor. I do my own thing. I don't follow rules. I actually like breaking rules. So I don't really follow rules. I kind of make them, I guess. And it's the same thing. So realtors, yes, of course, it's good to have a banner, and there is protection. But I mean, now we're talking about wine and beer. So really, it's nice to have an independent advice. So Rob, I'd like to know, like, in those 10 years, did your favorites change? Like, I'm sure at first, I love this, and now you're like, oh, I can't drink that stuff. It's like Kool-Aid. And how did your palate evolve?
I mean, when I first went to Vandage Institute here in Ottawa, it was 2012, and I just about clocking into my 40th. I think I just turned 40. So at the time, I was looking at a change, and I was like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I've got this IT business that went to hell with a bad partner. I don't want to be a career bartender in hospitality. I want to do something that's stimulating. And it's not that I didn't like the family at the Ottawa Marriott Hotel. I'm still kind of there casually. They treat me well. I mean, it's a good place, but it's a fun place, but it's not what I want to make my core focus. As a side gig, absolutely, it's a blast. But
40 hours, yeah, it's hard.
No, and I've done that route temporarily, and no, it's not what I wanted to do long term. So this just gradually built up. It's a continuous work in process. I mean, the pandemic has definitely put a hard stop and a start to a lot of things. Even now here in Ontario, as we were discussing, Doug Ford went kind of excessive this time on a much milder variant when most people, I think, 89% or 91% has at least one shot. 80 something two, and now we're probably over 50 with three. When does this end? But the journey of it still doesn't change. And what I'm saying here is we're always going to face adversity. I faced family loss. I lost my twin sister 2.5 years ago. My dad went 5 years prior, or 3 years prior to that, or two and a half, something like that. My mom was gone in April of 2020 from long-term dementia. And what I can say is just keep holding the fort. If you're passionate, you love what you do, and the labor of love is there. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some days you get tired of it. Just coming into this lockdown initially and feeling under the weather. And I'm not sure if it was Omicron or the flu. There's no way to be tested here right now. Even though I have 3 shots in me, I can say that you just keep going. And the joy of this is I expanded also into beer. I followed into the beer side of things about 3 years later. I was stuck at an event. This is funny, actually. So I did an event for Fire Chiefs in a now defunct company called Drunken Grapes. I was one of their sommeliers that was contracted out to do events, and they were a good outfit. They were fun to work for. And beer was on the list. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
Fucking hell, I know nothing about beer. So I pulled out La Rosse Gastronomy, the chef's Bible. It's got a page on beer, just basically saying lagers are like white wine, ales are like red wine. I'm like, well, that's pretty simple. So we'll just focus on that. And it was a theme of Canada versus the rest of the world. So at the time, I think I had Mill Street in there before they became part of Labatt. They were truly, I believe, either Ontario's or Canada's largest craft brewer.
Yeah,
Probably
they were
Ontario.
quite
I think
big.
Ontario, because technically Moosehead is still a craft brewer, and they're about 5% of Canada's sales by volume. They're a juggernaut. But to look at that, that's what got me into it. So I researched this program called Prud'Homme, and I developed into it, and I've achieved the level 3 out of 4 levels there. And at the time, I'd hit the height of what they offered, educationally speaking. Level 4 was developed between 2017 and 2019. And I just got too busy with business and other coursework. So I will get to that and do my master's level. But it's the hybrid of the two really opens up a lot of doors, because a lot of wine people, masters of wine, master sommeliers, might have a general understanding of beer. And I just want to say general, very general, like I did after reading that page or two, and just sort of understanding the nuances and realizing that tasting beer is subtly different to tasting wine, but a lot of the mechanics are similar in that the process of a flavor wheel and, certain grains and certain hop characteristics will impart certain flavors, as well as how you brew. It's very similar to viticulture and how you vinify wines. And, there's so many different things a brewer or a vintner can do to manipulate in the winery or the brewery. They cross-reference, but a lot of people don't bother because a lot of wine people are too snobby to look at beer. And a lot of beer people are pretty cool and don't want to look at the snobs on the wine front. So they're not really interested in it. So I took it up the middle, almost like a mixed martial artist would, and said, hey, if I'm going to be good at grappling, why not be good at striking too? And that's sort of with a combination of it. And it's created an interesting journey. And the pandemic has opened the doors to my client base growing across North America. Now, to any business builder out there, as this yourself, Francois, it's a long game. It's not something that's going to build overnight. And it's partly why I didn't marry myself to any supplier or producer, you haven't married yourself to any one investment house or realtor or realty organization or brokerage house, because it gives you, like me, the flexibility to work with clients in a way that opens it up to true possibilities and true customization that they would never find anywhere else. And I think that's really the magic of what we're doing.
No, that's excellent. And I love that analogy. So how did you transition from being a full-time employee in IT? Oh, no, you had your own business.
I did.
So you were not an employee. You're already an entrepreneur. So that's good. But still, I mean, you had something that was proven and it worked. And then you transitioned. Did you live off your savings and
that was hard. That's a different story.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost went into personal bankruptcy at one point because I staved it off. I didn't even have to do a proposal. I just fought and worked. And that's where the Marriott gig really was helpful.
Okay.
It allowed me to get in there for more hours. It's a very good paying, what people would say, a transitionary or non-professional job. But that's the ignorance of North America. Servers and bartenders are some of the best at multitasking complex tasks and working very hard on the floor. We tend to think that it's the Barbie in her 20s or the Ken doll that does this job, or you must be clearly doing something else, or you're just a loser for doing that because you're mature in doing it. And we have a very wrong attitude in Canada, especially about this, because there are some really professional servers and bartenders out there on the floor that make a killing. They do great.
And they make all the difference. So you can go to a great restaurant, horrible service, it's garbage. The meal, I don't care how good the food is, it destroys the experience. They come too often, and then you have a great server, and then it could be amazing. So you're so right with that.
Yeah, and they're knowledgeable too. Or we're now finally, with the pandemic, seeing a shift. I think maybe a little more to the European model. Some places are bundling in their tips into the fees, and I think that creates at a higher level a better experience, because particularly on the service floor, you're not having people throwing elbows to take the better section anymore.
No, that's it.
People are in a pool now, so what it also does is it exposes the bad servers and flushes them out, and you have a professional class of servers, and that's what you're talking about. So they focus on the experience, and when you're doing anything in business, it solves problems. You have to solve people's problems, but you have to also provide an experience. And, with the Drunken Grape, the experience is joy. I want my corporate clients, because that's what I focus on, dabbled into the consumer end, and it was a bit disastrous. People didn't bring the product I recommended.
Oh
You know,
no.
oh yeah, these are friends of mine that I know, and I'm still pretty friendly with them, but I was pretty disappointed with them. I won't
But
lie.
yeah, if you do a
And then the host,
tasting and
yeah, and then the host didn't really know how to host, and it wasn't really his fault because it's not his background. He's a tremendous business person. He's one of my business mentors, so you know, shit happens. But the corporate side I control and I do, and I can tell you it's the experience when people get together on a Zoom call, because it's the best way to do it, and you bring them through a journey and you open up right away with a drink in hand saying, hey, this is Rob from the Drunken Grape. Welcome to this great experience we're going to have for you today. You've already got them engaged. They already have a drink in hand. They're already listening to what you're talking about. And the joy level rises. And that's about a professionalism too, right? I mean, your impact off doing anything should be great right off the get-go. And it's about really loving what you do because you cannot hide passion. You know, there's a girl I know named Marley Alpers who's kind of in a network marketing Amway version of the wine world. It's called Scout and Cellar. Yeah, it's a US based company. I think they're only really there right now, but you know, we're talking about somebody who doesn't have on the books really a high level of education. She's very smart. She's a very good presenter, but her passion just kicks through and she does such a great job with it because she's passionate. And that is the difference right there. Knowledge can be gained over time. I mean,
yeah,
you know, we talked on a private call about crypto and gold and silver, some of the stuff I love investing in. Real estate's on the next block, but not here. I believe the international markets are a lot better. Canada is just in a crazy inflationary bubble across the board. We're watching housing prices, food prices, the price of your socks and underwear skyrocket here. And being agnostic opens the doors to get around that in a global community because you can't avoid that. And it's important to recognize those things, building forward and growing.
Yeah, it's good for any business. So I'd love to hear about your corporate events. Like, can you tell us how do you do a virtual wine tasting? I've only attended the boring ones, like you said earlier, privately. So you go to a nice fancy restaurant and it's food and wine, and then get out. So how do you do this virtually? That sounds really exciting.
Well, what you do is, I mean, in Ontario, it's pretty easy. I don't touch the booze. I have it shipped because I don't want to get involved in all the legalities of storing and holding alcohol. It's a pretty regulated industry. So what I do is I arrange the buying for the client, have it shipped to them through usually the LCBO or, you know, just have it delivered. Just get it out there to them. Breweries, a lot of breweries will ship and deliver either locally or within the province. They can do that. They can ship it out to you. There's a bit of a fee, but it's usually not too much money. So it gets the product right into the hands from the actual outlet to the door of the client itself. And then from there, we just take you on a journey. Now, if it's out of province or out of country, you often have to guide them to where they can buy the product.
Yeah, that is harder.
And source it for them. And they go and either have to pick it up by law because some places and jurisdictions, you gotta remember, we still run under 1918 laws from prohibition. Some places don't even allow shipping. Like New York City, you have to go pick up your own product. You can't even have it delivered.
Whereas even here, it's fairly recent. I mean, this much delivery. It used to be tougher.
Well, it used to be totally illegal. It used to be underground, or it was like one agency dial a bottle with really cheap, crappy beer.
Yes.
And the markup was colossal. I mean, you get a case of beer in those days. Your $25 case of beer in the year 2000 was $100 when it arrived.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. So things have changed. I mean, they've progressed. So that's really the gist of it. What we do is I do a whole experience guide for my client too. So we break down what they want to achieve. We break down what they want to discuss. So I read it out in a whole outline of what we go through with it. We talk a bit about wine and beer wine and food or beer and food, depending on what's happening. I actually do more beer tastings by far than wine tastings just because there's a lot less competition. And I think the cost of the product's a lot more accessible.
Yeah.
And it's also a lot easier to ship like a quad pack of canned beer to somebody. And you don't have to worry about breakage, spoilage. Bottles get really expensive. I mean, if you look at something like this, very few wineries have small sample size, like the airplane style bottle.
Yeah,
I wish they had that everywhere, but the cost of bottling is colossal. And the only reason that they do that is because the volume of sales is so high in the airline. If you take a look at the wines you're getting, You're not getting premium wine. You might on first
No.
class. You do on first class. I've had the pleasure of flying that a couple times, but in economy, you get Jackson
No.
Trigg, and it's like cheap wine. But even then, the bottling cost could be like $3-4 for a bottle this size.
Oh,
Even
wow.
the small ones can cost you $1.25. People don't realize that the industry is so heavily taxed that the producer actually makes some of the least money in the actual program of it itself.
The biggest profit is the government, as usual.
It is. So, or the distributor. The distributor, in which case is also the government. It's LCBO. But if you get into the States, it's a lot of private distributors like Total Wine and more. They make a fortune off moving people's product. So there are those hurdles, but they're not difficult. But yeah, you put them through the engagement plan. And obviously you have a discovery call, figure out what they want beforehand. You write that up, package it, put it together, and then you execute the event much like you would on a live tasting. So at that point, people have the recommended glassware. I like stemless glasses. I mean, this is a tumbler. Usually open-faced wine glasses are a bit better. Tulip glasses for beer. And I like stemless. Why? Because you don't have to worry. But imagine knocking over by your computer a stemmed wine glass, and it goes flying into your screen. If it's stemless, it tends to slide off a table. I've done it accidentally, break it on the floor, and you got to play pickup 52 with a mop, but it's a lot less hell than destroying your technical equipment around you, let me tell you. So yeah, there's even the subtleties of things like that. And you just package it and customize it for them, and you let the engagement go off. And you really want to have a session that covers about an hour. You don't want to go too much longer, but you want to engage them in between. You want them to talk about what they feel that's in that glass. When you get into a wine or a beer like this, this is a iconic wine. This is Stag's Leap Wine Cellars. This is the Artemis. This is the one that won the Judgment of Paris in 1976. This beat out the best of Bordeaux. And it was a competition by a gentleman by the name of Steve Spurrier, who was an English journalist. It was an American. I can't remember her name, but she was an American living in France under France. She had a French citizenship, and all the judges were French, and they did it blind, and they thought they would crush California. And the cabs have ever since demolished them annually in competitions. Like it just seems to be that California cab. It's, these rich jammy notes. It just has such a good affinity, not only for oak. I mean, Cab Sauvignon is a grape that's a crossing between Sauvignon Blanc and Cabernet Franc. It's a French varietal. It comes from Bordeaux, and they map it to at least the 18th century, if not further back. It's a tannic variety. It's got a lot of weight and body to it. It also has great affinity to age incredibly well in barrel. So, the Bordelais had just brilliant mixing this with Petit Verdot and Cab Franc and Cab and Merlot to balance it out, because as the northern reaches of viticulture. Well, in California, you have a Mediterranean climate. And if you take a look at some of the wine belt throughout the world, anything that's Mediterranean tends to be damn hard to beat. Italy, for instance, is so dominant with varietals. It has more wine varietals than anywhere else in the world. It's out of the 1,358 or so categorized and listed, about a third belong to Italy globally.
Oh my, that's a lot.
And in California, they have half of all the soil types in the world. It's tremendous biodiversity. You have volcanic soil, you have schist, you have granite, you have limestone, you have sandstone, you have alluvial, colluvial soils, which are formed by slope wash. So you also have this long ripening period, which just invited it so well for things like this. And, that's just an example of some of the things we cover while we drink. And it just gets people excited about it, because there's so much more in the glass than just what you think. There's a history to these wineries and breweries and distilleries. There's exciting stories. Usually, some of these breweries in Europe, like Weihenstephan, which is famous for Weissbier, and Hefeweizen, has been around since 1040. It's the longest continuous running brewery in existence. It has never shut operations. And you think about it, it survived wars, famines. Famines what happens with grains when you have a famine? Well, you're not going to produce beer, right? You're going to turn to food production. Somehow they kept the doors open anyway. And you know, the Allies invaded that territory in World War II, especially bombed the hell out of it. And somehow this brewery in Bavaria stayed intact. It's incredible.
Wow.
So you learn about things like this in the journey, and then you learn about how acidity makes things sharper in the glass, or how body and weight adds character, and how it pairs to certain types of food. You know, how cheese is a great pairing for wine
Yeah.
and beer, and so on. And it's fun because you get people engaged. And I think the key is engagement. If you don't have anyone engaged, they're going to walk away and fall asleep. And we're in a society now that's starving for socialization.
Yes, very much so. I'm sure this, like the pandemic, although it did close certain things down, like you said, it did open up other doors. Like a lot of people had Zoom Christmas parties and things. So this would be an amazing way. Otherwise, like, oh, we're going to look at each other on the screen and what do you say and what do you do?
Yeah. And, you know, think about it. Half of the office hates the other half of it anyway. So you get them
That's it
away
too.
from the actual live event. They're in their house. They can tend to their kids and their pets before the event kicks off. They no longer have to commute halfway across the city. We know how weather is in Canada and the northern reaches of the United States in the wintertime. Half the time, you don't even want to leave your house. It's just lousy. Unless you're going to the ski hill, skating, or playing hockey.
Yeah,
snowshoeing or sledding or snowmobiling. Yeah, exactly. So you no longer have to worry about that. You eliminate flying people that, you know, you may have a company of 50 people, 5 live or 10 of your staff live in Toronto. Well, in the old style of events, what do you think you had to do in a live event to get them up here? How much money did that cost? I mean,
was enormous.
How prohibitive was that on getting people together? You did it, but it was costly as hell. Now you can do it for a fraction of the cost, have better engagement. They're not there all night. They can go off and do something else afterwards. And they feel that they've been looked after in a very proper way. And, you know, the other part of it too is green. We want green now, right? Yeah. Well, if I'm flying and driving people everywhere, what's the emissions like all over the place? Enormous. Now, if you're in your house and you just hit the light switch, you're already paying hydro bills and you have your computer and home office now set up there, thanks to the pandemic. And in some ways, it's a big blessing. You are not contributing. You're contributing to a much better environmental footprint by hosting events this way too. So there's a lot of benefit. It's all benefit. If you think about it, it's you knock out cost to a company. Yeah. They can take that money and reinvest it in a better Christmas gifts instead of shitty baskets. They can turn around and invest in your training to elevate you. Yeah. They can improve pay. If they decide to do none of that, they can give you a vacation, better vacation terms, or they can give you better work flexibility. They can outfit you with better equipment that you need to get your job done. A lot of places, supply chains and the equipment they provide have been in tatters, and it opens the door for them to reinvest in all that, which also means that it secures better stability and security for your job down the road, because let's face it, about 1% of people want to take our route. 99% are just happily employed and they just want to be well employed. And there's nothing wrong with that. No. Everybody has a different metric of what they want to achieve.
No, exactly. And it's very important. I mean, to have that flexibility, like you were saying, some people don't want to quit, but having the live work balance is very, it changes things quite a bit. It helps you, stay. So right now we're seeing a lot of people quitting jobs and leaving positions, but the work-life balance, if it is doable, is very important. And I didn't realize the Drunken Grape could do all that. So Rob, thank you so much. So if people want to reserve their own event, what's the best way to reach you on?
They can hit me up at rob@thedrunkengrape.com. They can hit me at info@thedrunkengrape.com. There's my website, thedrunkengrape.com. There's the YouTube channel that you can even reach out to, and I invite everyone to subscribe to that and hit up the playlist, the virtual happy hour. I have guests every week, and actually I would love to have you as a guest coming up soon, because I think we've got a lot more to chat about, and we can really dig into some cool things, and we can talk more about your world, which I'm excited about too. And they can hit me up on LinkedIn, Facebook, I think at LinkedIn, I actually have it under, it's my name, but it's I am Rob Statham. It's kind of hilarious. I was able to find that. But you can actually just go at the Drunken Grape at Instagram. You can punch in the Drunken Grape on Facebook. The company page comes up. And the beauty of today's integrated world online is that I mean, I'm not sure what I think of the metaverse coming, but right now, presently, it's so well integrated that you can find me and hit me up in many ways. I mean, the phone's probably going to buzz at about 12 to 15 different forms of communication.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. No, and then metaverse, maybe you will have virtual wine tasting. You kind of have, I guess you'll need a straw with the goggles, and then you try to, I don't know, but it could
I don't
be
know about that
interesting.
whole virtual world, man. But that's a whole different topic we could discuss.
Yes, on the next time. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Wine and Real Estate and giving us insights into what you do and something very different. I haven't met many others that do virtual wine and beer tastings. So this was excellent. And until the next time, cheers.
Thank you very much. Cheers, my friend. Much love.